Well, it really is an honor to be back. I send greetings from Pastor Ty and Sina as well. I chatted with them by messenger this morning, and they said to be sure to send you greetings and their love for you all. This is my fifth or sixth trip. I lost count actually of how many times. I believe it's my fifth time personally. I wasn't here on the team last year, but I came two times my first year. This is my picture of my family, and I realized that I needed to change out this slide. It's really old. So it's actually probably 5 years old. Not really. It's probably 4 years old. So I have a beautiful wife. My wife is originally from Argentina. So we do, in fact, love the nations at the University of Texas. And I have my oldest son, Sammy, is now 11. And my youngest is 7, and I would appreciate prayer. He's battling a virus, and mommy is dealing with that at home, and just the devil wants to steal, kill, and destroy, even when dad's away. So we have an amazing team. If you just stand, they'll come in a second and greet you, but just stand. Team Texas, I'm really proud of these guys. Thank you. So, next slide. Who's doing our slides here? Thank you. Thanks. So, just a curious question, I guess, comes to mind in your hearts, maybe for the first time that you're actually seeing me, knowing me. How did I get here? How did this place get so deeply connected to my heart? Well, I'll just tell you really briefly because time won't be able to tell you the full length film. But years and years ago, there was a missionary that God had raised up. He was a Chi Alpha missionary, very famous in Chi Alpha circles back in the 80s, and even before in the 70s, by the name of Howard Kenyon. I don't know if anybody is old enough to know that name. Anybody curious? I'm curious if you know that name. So Howard Kenyon was transitioning from stateside Chi Alpha to actually go to Asia. And he was doing language school and eventually landed in Taiwan with he and his family. This is back in the early 90s. And so at that time, the Taiwanese population at the University of Texas was the largest. They were the largest group, with about 700 students from Taiwan alone at UT. Now they're the fourth or fifth with just a couple hundred. About 5,000 international students at the University of Texas, about 51,000 students at our school. So I knew this question was coming when I had breakfast over with him. He was staying and was speaking in my home, and he asked this question. I knew it was coming. I was dreading it. How many Taiwanese students do you have involved in Chi Alpha? 0. Didn't know a single Taiwanese student. I knew it was coming because he was aware that they were the largest group on campus. So I told him no one. And it just was like, immediately in that moment, this was like 1990. I made a 2-year commitment to Chi Alpha, and then I was going to be a real missionary with visas and airplane tickets and real expensive budgets. And that was July 1988. So my math isn't very good or something, and now I've just finished 30 years at the University of Texas doing Chi Alpha. So back then in 1990, I was troubled in my spirit, and I said, God, you've got to do something about that problem of not knowing a single Taiwanese student. And just a couple months later, after that breakfast moment with Howard Kenyon, I was in the elevator going to the Chi Alpha worship service on campus, and one of our student leaders was with me in the elevator going up, and this Asian girl wearing a jacket that intrigued him. He started a conversation. He was real outgoing, and we met Qingyan Liu from Taiwan, who was an undergrad at that time studying at the University of Texas. And long story short, yeah, very, very short, we went from knowing 0 Taiwanese in a matter of just 2.5 months later, 3 months later, we met about 70. I had an opportunity to introduce myself and introduce our community to about 125 new Taiwanese students that next school year. And so immediately we had a heart connect. And so, next slide. There's several friends that I would love to be able to introduce you to, but these aren't Taiwanese friends, obviously. But they are actually fellow missionaries at the University of Texas, San Antonio now, but both of them came as international students from Japan to 2 different campuses in Texas. Ryota came, I'll mention a little bit of their story today in the message. One of our team members is actually from the UT San Antonio Chi Alpha chapter, Liam. And so I had the opportunity, because of relationship with them, I was privileged to actually perform their wedding in Tokyo. Wow. So they both came to know Jesus in Chi Alpha groups, Ryota in Houston, just north of Houston, and Shinobu at the University of Texas when she was doing graduate studies in Austin. And so in 2012, December 2012, right before the World Mission Summit there, I had the opportunity to actually give a little, I just said, hey, what are the possibilities of me taking the opportunity while I'm so close in Asia to take a couple days, fly to Taiwan, and then fly back with you from Tokyo. So I had a 3-day trip that I mapped out, and I wound up meeting about 15 alumni from about a 20-plus year period of time. And there was lots of tears, lots of friends that are not yet believers that are still like family. So I don't know why, it's so raw and real still to this day. I think it's just supernatural. There's no explanation for it. I'm flying into Taoyuan, and that 5-year ago moment, actually about 6 years now, flying into Taoyuan after decades of relationship with hundreds, literally hundreds and hundreds of Taiwanese relationships. I'm sobbing. As the plane is descending into Taoyuan, my heart is just so full and I'm sobbing. Jesus, I'm finally here. So long before I was in Taiwan, Taiwan was in me. And God did something supernatural. At this World Mission Summit, I wound up reconnecting through a sovereign moment. Again, don't have time to go into detail, but I wound up wanting to reconnect. Actually, I needed to reconnect with Ty and Sina, who I knew that were at this place because they were familiar with what was going on in campus ministry in Asia, and I needed to introduce this young man from Oklahoma that was wanting to connect in Malaysia. So, I'm looking all over this Mission Summit conference, Chi Alpha conference, for Ty and Sina. I wound up connecting with them, and I do, in fact, be the bridge for this young man in Malaysia, but we wound up talking about what God has just recently done in my heart being in Japan and Taiwan, and their eyes lit up, and long story short, God had put it in our Chi Alpha leadership's heart before even meeting Ty and Sina that God was wanting us to commit 5 years to come and take teams to Taiwan. I did not know at that time when they were still in Manila as giving leadership to One Hope over Asia and campus ministry that they were already feeling the stirring of their heart. Before they moved here, they were feeling the heart to come, relocate their base of ministry after 30 years to Taiwan. The convergence of God is so beautiful, and He does not waste a thread of your life. It's so cool. So, Team Texas was born. Gary Pascal, who was instrumental in me getting connected with Chi Alpha, went on the team. We wound up connecting with Sina, and the adventure began. It was close to Chinese New Year 2014 when we actually began this journey together. So you see some amazing people from all over the island. So we were introduced to Chanel Keck and Teresa Coe and my good friend Francie. So we have a really awesome team with us. I'm going to ask. We have a couple of things that we want to do, and then I'm going to share the message. I'm going to have to fly through it. So, guys, just come on. The three of you that are going to come up and give some presentations real quickly, come. And I'm going to turn the microphone over to Melissa. Just introduce yourself real quickly and we'll give some gifts away.
Hi, I'm Melissa. This is my second year in Taiwan. Actually, I came last year with the team, so this year I'm going to be here for a month. So I'll be spending a little bit more time with y'all in a week, so I'll be back. But yeah, we're all students at UT, except for Liam, who's a student in San Antonio. But yeah, we're really excited to be here, and we have a couple of gifts for some of the awesome pastors and missionaries that are here. So this first one, we do want to extend to Vicky and Peter. It's an awesome book that Kelly will be using today in his preaching. It's The Prodigal God. And then a little bit of Texas in here, if you want to unveil that.
Yeah, we don't want you to forget about Texas.
It's the heavy. Also, fun story, a good friend of ours, Tanya, we met her last year. She goes to a different, Tanya, she's an amazing, the gift that we gave them is from her absolute favorite restaurant that I had the privilege of introducing to her, Rudy's Barbecue. So that is the most Texas food you'll probably, the most southern food you'll probably eat. So that's what I want to give to y'all. And so Liam has the present for,
Hi, my name is Liam, and I was born in Taipei, but I'm currently studying at UTSA, and this is my third year with the team, and I am privileged to be able to serve the team and serve you guys again. And and I have a gift here for Tyler and Christy. Tyler and Christy.
Thank you so much.
There you go.
Hi, my name is TJ, and I am on staff with Longhorn Chi Alpha, and I'm excited to be sharing the word with you guys next week, so hope to see you back then. And I have a gift for Ty and Sina, and Vicky, if you will pass that along to them, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'm going to invite a couple of our students to share their story with you, and then I'll preach. So, James and Kristen, if you come up.
Good morning, church. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning.
So, as Kelly just mentioned, my name is James Alburn. I am actually a graduate of UT Austin. I just finished my last semester in mechanical engineering, and I am fortunate enough that I'll be attending my master's school there as well. So, God opened the door for that. So, Kelly's glad, I'm glad. It'll be good to be a couple. So just a little bit about my background. I actually was born into an Assemblies of God church back in Flower Mound, Texas, which is near Dallas, which is a little bit north of Austin. So I had a very amazing pair of parents and sisters who really emphasized just really pressing into God, making Him a priority in your life, really getting to know Him relationally, not just as a practice of religion. And so that was my upbringing. I really knew God. I actually can't remember the day that I got saved because I asked for God to save me so many times because I thought I wasn't saved. So I really don't know when I was, but I was very, very young. But it wasn't, so I knew that God was important. I knew that He was real and that my parents had a big emphasis on who He was. But there comes a point in every child's life who grows up in church that you have to make your faith no longer about your parents and your family, but about yourself. And so I was very blessed that I had that a lot younger than a lot of my peers. I had that towards the end of my elementary school, and I really said, Lord God, I'm gonna give myself and sacrifice my own wants and needs for what you have for me. And that was confirmed by a moment where my youth pastor at the time, I went to a kids camp that we had, that the Assemblies of God put on in Texas, and one of my pastors spoke over me that God wanted to use me as a leader in in life and with other men of God. So I carried that with me through a lot of my middle school and high school years, of this idea that I needed to embody the values of Christ, and to kind of make that an emphasis in leading other peers with me towards God. And so I did that, but the perception that I had of that was I needed to make myself right. I needed to do the things to make me and God not equal, but I need to get right with God. I needed to do the right things, to know all the verses, to kind of have that aura of being the saint of the church, so to speak. Not like in the Bible context, but the good guy. You're the good kid. And so it really wasn't until college that I entered UT that I kind of had my eyes and my butt kicked a little bit to see that that God is more than just about you. Your faith with Jesus is not just you and Him getting right. There is another level. And so a man named Chris Rao, who is the undergraduate pastor along with Kelly at UT Austin, kind of took me under his wing, and we met up like 6 days a week my freshman year. And he really showed me that our call for Christ is more than just a relationship. It is, and that's the core of it, but He also calls us to more than that. He calls us to disciple others. He says, go into all the world to make disciples, not just converts, but disciples. And so that was a big breaking point in my life, was that it's not just to get people saved that we're called to do, but rather to help them grow, to become disciple makers themselves. So the past 3 years, I've had the immense honor and pleasure to be a small group leader in Kaiwa. So I lead a Bible study and a kind of a living life moment with many other guys in UT Austin. So I've had the privilege of having discipled some guys myself, and so there's a guy named Sam and a guy named Adrian who are now leading their own small groups that I've had the pleasure of really just being their friend, and then God did all the work there. But I kind of just wanted to encourage everyone who is feeling like life is very challenging and very a lot going on, that the more I gave into what God was wanting me to do, the more that I sacrificed for Him, the more and more He allowed me to succeed in the other aspects of my life, whether that be academics or extracurriculars. The more I sacrificed, the more He gave me where I thought I wasn't going to. So that's just a little bit of
Awesome. Try to keep this snappy. I'm Kristen. I have one more year left at UT. I'm a business major there. Like James, I grew up in a Christian home. I think I gave my life to Jesus when I was 7 years old. But a big part of my story is just related to really my understanding of who God was. When I was like 2 days old, I was diagnosed with a genetic condition called cystic fibrosis. And from the world's eyes, there's no cure. And so my life for so long, at least from the world's perspective, was so defined by doctors, and that this would be what your future is, that the inevitable brokenness of your bodies, it just wasn't good. And so because of that, I had this kind of inherent mistrust of God. I had a really hard time really seeing Him as a father, because there was so much confusion and so many questions based upon my experience. And so I loved Jesus, but I didn't really know Him, and there was just there's a lot of lies that I believed about who God was. So anyway, fast forward, when I was 14 years old, my family, I grew up on the East Coast, kind of near Philadelphia, that area of the world, kind of close to New York, if you're familiar with that. Moved to Texas when I was 14, and from there my health kind of just really declined really quickly. I ended up being in the hospital 4 times over the course of a year and losing over half my lung function. And there was a point in the middle of that year where I was super mad at God. I don't know if you've ever had those super raw moments, but I was sitting in this condo at this beach, and I didn't even want to go to the beach. I was just bitter, doing treatments and coughing my brains out, sitting in this little, this room, and I heard the Lord speak to me for the first time, like, clearly. It was like the Holy Spirit, in my anger and in my questions, God just so clearly spoke to me. And it was like He revealed Himself as a dad to me, and He gave me this song. That was really just a declaration of God's promises and His truth in my life. That everything that the world had tried to pin me as, everything that had defined me my entire life, there was like this question and this invitation to let go of that identity and to trust Him with my future. And so the next week I ended up being in the hospital again. Nothing changed physically, but in my heart it was like a change in position, because I knew that He was good. Like that song, like declaring that He's good, it was like I believed it in my heart. It wasn't just a head knowledge. It was like, in the depth of my being, I know that God is good. And I know that his plans for me are good. So anyway, fast forward, nothing changed physically. One day the following March, this was back in 2013, when I was in high school, I heard the Lord speak again pretty clearly, and he said, I want you to put scriptures related to healing up on your mirror and declare them over your life, and can become more than what you feel, more real than what you feel, even in your body. Like when you look in the mirror, what are you going to allow to define you? What the truth of the Word of God says or what you feel? And I did that. I stayed up all night just writing scriptures, plastered them everywhere. And within 3 weeks, my lung function miraculously rebounded to over 100%. Total freedom. So the Lord has just taken me on this wild journey and just given me such a heart. Like it's like I've been set free and invited into this incredible story of getting to see other people set free. So after high school, I moved to Colorado for a year, did Bible school and worked at a ministry. And then I was kind of like, what's next, Lord? Like, go to the nations, what? And he just really gave me a heart for UT. You know, when you just like this burning need to just be there and to just, for that campus, to just see and experience the goodness of God like I have, and to have their identities rewritten in love. And so anyway, I'm a small group leader like James and Melissa at UT. I've had some really incredible opportunities. Just, you know, I don't know, it's been so cool to be in the context of community in a new way, and I'm just excited to see, you know, what the Lord will use with my, you know, yes in the future. So, anyway.
We have one more slide we can show. That's a good point to bring that in. Actually, go to the next one. So, I believe with all my heart that the university represents one of the most strategic places on the planet where we can actually see university students' lives transformed. Many of them who have never had the opportunity to really fully understand the claims of Christ, come to know Jesus. They might have grown up around church, but they experience the gospel, they taste and see that the Lord is good, no matter whether they're from Tyler, Texas, or Taipei, Taiwan. And their lives are transformed in a way that they actually realize that their primary reason for being is to demonstrate his kingdom and become disciple makers who make disciples who make disciples. We are going to transition, and I promise to not be lengthy. Am I fine? Really? All right. Well, let's pray real quickly. Jesus, I thank you for your word. I believe that there is a word for this congregation, and I ask that you would help me to be concise in sharing this word. That it be impactful. Give us ears to hear what your Spirit wants to say, Lord, through this word. In Jesus' name. Well, as I referred to Ryota earlier, that just want to tell you that he sold everything that he had to get a master's degree to pursue his love story with Shinobu. As I said, he got saved at a school near Houston, and Shin got saved and gave her life to Jesus through our Chi Alpha group. But years later, they didn't know each other. I encouraged them to go have coffee together in Japan when they were home together. Matchmaker, yeah, you're right. And they did. And so they pursued a love story, and so days after they were engaged, he's in Texas now, returned from being in Japan for a little bit, and they find themselves in a park with Ryota's friends crawling around on the ground, in the grass, frantically looking, because Shinobu played baseball with some of their friends and lost the ring. Now, who felt the pain of that day? Was it the friends? No. Though Shin felt badly, it was basically Ryota because he bought that thing, right? And it was a sign of his love. Now, beautifully, because some friends actually loved what he loved, a shout was heard about an hour later, "I found it." Right? That was good news for everybody. A friend recently blessed me. I don't know if you can pull a copy of that book out. You can just wave it around. But a friend recently blessed me with Timothy Keller's book, The Prodigal God, which this message is based on, and I'm giving to this pastoral staff. That echoes Jesus' radical desire to seek and save the lost. He asserts that the prodigal son parable from Luke 15 is actually misnamed, and I'll reference his suggested title in a little bit. But let's read from Luke chapter 15 today, will you? Well, can we please, for the context of Jesus' third parable found in this entire chapter. So the entirety of this chapter is, in essence, 3 parables. Let's read the context of this. So, again, I'm reading from the New American Standard, Luke chapter 15. Verses 1 and 2. Now, all the tax collectors and the sinners were coming near him to listen to him. Both the Pharisees and the scribes began to grumble, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." Essentially, social outcasts and generally hated people, townspeople, loved proximity with Jesus and his teaching. I imagine deeply intimate moments that were authentic, with laughter, gut-wrenching laughter, and deep soul-cleansing tears of repentance in those kind of meetings. This unusual group of misfits provoked spiritual leaders of the day. They convened, actually, specifically to complain that Jesus associated with such sinful people, even eating with them. The leaders squashed the forgiveness and freedom, acceptance and healing. Pure joy with Jesus was replaced with angry words. Something probably like, "Your kind of people aren't welcome here. Get cleaned up first, and then we might let you into our community," right? Well, ironically, these leaders were supposed to actually facilitate others coming into relationship with God. Isn't there a touch of irony there? Well, the motif of Jesus' 3 parables in this chapter 15 is really visible. In chapter 15, we have the lost sheep, parable of the lost sheep. We have the lost coin, and what Timothy Keller in this book has coined the parable of the 2 lost sons instead of the prodigal son. The parable of the 2 lost sons. These 3 parables really should be seen as 3 acts in a drama or some kind of masterpiece of an opera, if you were. Jesus initiates his 3-in-1 message masterpiece with a crescendo of parables with parables 1 and 2. In the lost sheep, Jesus pointedly asks the question. He starts out and he asks, "What man among you wouldn't leave the 99 to find one lost sheep?" Any respectable owner with character and economic common sense would certainly do this, right? That's implied. Jesus further implies that God's heart recklessly leaves the 99 to find the one. We sang about it. With no concern for risk, the owner must find the one. With no concern for risk. And of course, he celebrates when the lost is found, right? Well, in Act 2, the second parable, the lost coin parable, Jesus echoes his opening point. What woman would not turn the house upside down to find a coin that's basically worth a day's wage? Now, this isn't for life savings, but it's a day's wage, right? Anyone with character and economic care would do this. Jesus implies here that God will relentlessly pursue, like this woman who leaves her day's scheduled activity to prioritize finding that coin, right? Well, the owner must find that one. So why is celebration of the lost being found so difficult to understand? Right? So Jesus is setting us up. As we approach the third parable from Luke chapter 15, it's the longest of the trilogy, if you will, right? And in Pastor Timothy Keller's book, in his introduction of the prodigal God, this is a quote that I'd like to read. He says, Timothy Keller says, "This book and the parable from Luke 15 is written both to curious outsiders and insiders of the faith, both to those Jesus calls younger brothers and those he calls elder brothers in the famous parable of the prodigal son. I'm turning to this familiar story," he says, "to get to the heart of the Christian faith. Now, if we compared the teaching of Jesus to a deep, clear lake, I believe," he says, "this parable is one of the clearest spots where we can see all the way to the bottom." Cool. Well, Pastor Timothy Keller is basically boldly stating that this chapter 15 in Luke contains a great summary statement of Jesus' teaching and his mission from the Father. Let's read the rest of Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 31, and I'm going to do this really quickly. "And he said, a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me.' So he divided his wealth between them. And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country. And there he squandered his estate with loose living. Now when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country. And he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving him anything to eat. But when he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread? But I'm dying out here with hunger. I'll get up and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men.' So he got up and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off," Jesus says, "his father saw him and felt compassion for him, and he ran in and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet, and bring the fattened calf, kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field," Jesus goes on to say, "and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. And he summoned one of the servants and began inquiring what these things could be. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he's received him back safe and sound.' But he, the older brother, became angry and was not willing to go in. And his father came out and began pleading with him. But he answered and said to his father, 'Look, for so many years I've been serving you and have never neglected a command of yours, and yet you have never given me a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your wealth with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him.' And he said to him, 'Son, you always have been with me, and all that is mine is yours.' But we had to celebrate and rejoice, for this brother of yours was dead, begun to live, and was lost, and has been found." I want to remind you that this is one long moment with these individuals, right? So we're having a moment together. This was not over days. This was one sitting moment. Or standing. To examine this third parable and extract really what God desires to speak to us today, I'm going to ask you and plead with you, especially those of you that are not hearing this parable for the first time, especially those of you that have grown up in the church. How many of you have heard a message or somebody teach on this passage before? Probably virtually all of us in this room. So I'm going to plead with you. Please consider this text with fresh eyes. Ask the Lord right now, give me fresh eyes. Don't focus on the younger son and his father's response. right? Although this is admittedly beautiful. Listen to Jesus' opening words. Go back to verse 1. A man had 2 sons. A man had 2 sons. He identifies the main characters here in what I'm calling Act 3, in the third parable. A father, an elder son, and a younger son. 3 characters. So in Acts 1 and 2, Jesus illustrates the single point. Our great God deeply cares about the lost. Lost sheep and coins? Well, yeah, he cares about normal things of life. But Jesus is telling his critics here, with every fiber of his soul, you've got him all wrong. You've got the Father all wrong. My Father cares more about eternal souls than creeds, rules, and religious appearance. He cares about restoring the lost to the place of belonging and security with him, a place that we call what? Home. Well, with a crescendo, Jesus unveils a story that every listener identifies with. Every listener identifies with it. Every single person can identify with a parent and a child, or children in this case. You're either a parent or you're a child. You're definitely a child of someone. Many of you in this room are parents. All of you have parents, right? So every single person identifies. So imagine this story. Again, he pulls the curtains open, and what does he say? A man had 2 sons. So imagine this in a context. Most of you in this room grew up in an Eastern culture, and even African culture is far closer to the East than it is Western culture. The younger of the 2 sons had the shameful audacity to tell his dad, I want my share of the estate now, before you die. I want my share of the estate now. Now, what unthinkable dishonor. Imagine a Chinese son doing this. That's unthinkable. This story hits the hearers like a bomb. Aren't there any rules for this kind of family dishonor? Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. Yeah, there's some rules. But this isn't Jesus' point at all. Look what happens next. His dad divides the wealth between the sons. Only days pass with money freshly in his pocket, and the younger son packs his stuff and moves to a distant land without a gracious goodbye. What an embarrassment to the family, in full view of the community. Hang on to your seatbelt, I'm going to go through this fast. So, the younger son wastes all his money in wild living, and hard times come suddenly for him. This Jewish boy begins to starve and is so desperate he gets a job to feed pigs. He's so hungry that even the pig food looks good. He finally comes to his senses and creates a plan to humble himself and say, Dad, I've sinned against both heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son, and I'm not asking to live under your roof anymore. Please just let me be one of your day laborers. So he returned home. While he's still a long way off, his father sees him coming and runs to meet him. Filled with love and compassion, his dad hugs and kisses him. The boy barely gets words of repentance out of his mouth when his dad interrupts him in his appeal for forgiveness. Quick, bring the finest robe, bring a ring to show everyone in the community that he belongs to me. Get the barbecue ready, we'd say in Texas. Kill the calf and let's have a party like never before. My son was dead and now has returned to life. He was lost and now he's found. So the party began. I know this story is deeply emotional, but please, I'm going to call on you again. We're getting close to the main point of Jesus. I know this is going to be hard for you to maybe see. we're not at the main point of Jesus' story yet. Remember verse 11. A man had 2 sons. Jesus will soon refer to the other son, but I want you to hear what the original hearers were hearing. To his listeners, these Jewish spiritual leaders of the time, the absurdity of this recklessness of the father in Jesus' story makes them shake their head and begin to think, if I were their father, they judge that this dad lacked courage to discipline the wretched child. I imagine their foreheads have now turned inward, and they're wringing their beards, nervously pulling at it with disapproval and judgment. This effect is precisely Jesus' intent. But he's not finished. Jesus is beginning to poke into the depths of their hearts. But which character is Jesus linking them to of the 3 characters? So, where's the older brother when the party starts? Things happen so quickly, right? The workday had not finished. Like a good, hardworking son, the older son is in the fields sweating, dirty, and has fresh blisters from the day's efforts. Tired, hungry, frustrated, boastful of importance. He's still boiling inside because his younger brother abandoned family responsibility for self-indulgent, wild living. As soon as he returned home, he heard music and dancing. He asked the servant, "Hey, what's going on?" Naively, get this, the servant assumes that the older brother is going to rejoice. Your brother's back, and your dad has invited the whole town to a massive barbecue to celebrate his safe return. Come, join the party. Jesus exposes a long-standing poisonous heart problem here at this moment. The older brother was furious and would not go in. Hidden emotions and expectations that he imposed on himself and others were now coming to the surface. He angrily mused to himself, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?" He probably threw a fit with his dad's careless response. What is he thinking? He's not thinking. How naive and stupid. Doesn't the old man know that where this son of his has been? How stupid. You feel the moment? He's furious with no one daring to be near him at this moment. When a familiar, intimate voice called for him, the tent curtain pulls back. With his dad wearing festive robes and a smile that quickly evaporates and disappears with the awareness that his son is furious. His father came out, Jesus says, and begged the elder son, "Please, son, come celebrate with us." But the son snapped like a snake with venom. "All these years, I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me. And in all that time, you never even gave me one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back, after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate with the whole city?" You feel the tension here? The moment is tense, and now Jesus has his listeners' full attention. His full attention. Curious as to how he will continue. They now know that he's linked them to the elder brother. No listener could have imagined the self-indulgent dishonor that the younger brother had, but the self-righteous dishonor is bitter and equally dishonoring to the dad, perhaps even more so. There is no son who should ever dare speak so frankly and disrespectfully to his parent. Would you agree? But this firstborn son feels strangely entitled and self-justified to correct the ignorant, reckless love of the Father. Here's a key point in the narrative. Just when you'd assume that the Father has every right to call his servants and punish the elder son for his utter dishonor and humiliation, right? Jesus continues to shock his listeners as he echoes the Father's response to this indignant heart position. We're getting close, and I'm going to wrap up very soon. He says this. Jesus says, "Look, dear son." In my view, these words of grace are equally an unbelievable demonstration of the Father's reckless love. We sang about it, even when I was your foe. Still your love reached out to me. These are the individuals that will call him to be crucified. In Spanish, this moment might read, hijito. Little son. As a term of endearment from a daddy to a little boy, the choice of the Father's words echo of God's infinite mercy and grace toward a self-indulgent, lost younger son, and even the self-righteous, lost elder brother. Jesus concludes with a beautiful revelation of the Father's heart toward even self-righteous elder sons who represent the Pharisees and the scribes, the very ones who grumbled bitterly about his proximity with the self-indulgent tax collectors and sinners in verses 1 and 2. Jesus ends this opera with the Father's amazing song of an invitation for the older brother, the older son, to come home. A reckless, lavish love. Look, dear son, you've always stayed with me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now is found. He began this opera with one lost sheep, 1 out of 100 being found, and then one lost coin out of 10 being found. In the last parable, we easily identify one of the sons as lost, right? Well, the self-indulgent sinner resists God's standards in an obvious manner to everyone around. He's put off by rules and wants nothing to do with religion. He's the younger son. Unfortunately, it has not been clearly seen by most of us that the second son in this parable is the primary intention of Jesus' primary audience. These sons were equally lost. Equally lost. With broken relationship with the Father. These only care about rules and performance. The older sons are like this. They only cared about being right in their own eyes above having a right relationship with the Father and others. I'm going to invite Vicky to come up. Prepare your hearts for what God will want to say to you specifically. Well, rightly in this parable of the two lost sons, Jesus concludes, interestingly, with a cliffhanger. Sort of like a French film that leaves you hanging. What? What was that about? He intentionally, in his narrative, does not tell us if the elder brother comes into the party. Did you ever think about that? We don't know. Did he ever get in? Did he ever come into the party? We don't know. So this is very clear evidence that Jesus is actually extending his hand out to his primary audience, the scribes and the Pharisees, to say, these people that are fuming mad and venomously angry at him, Jesus is looking square in the eyes of his foes, and he's telling them, little son, they're furious with you. Come into the party. Talk about a reckless love. We can see it with the younger son. when somebody is furious with you, offended at you, you can look them in the eyes with tears. Say, let it go. Come into the party. I've slaved for you for years indicates that the elder brother was offended at his dad for not meeting his expectations in his life. Life didn't go as he thought it should. God in fact owed him because of his extra hours in the long hot sun, right? Jesus is amazingly extending a deeply emotional invitation toward his accusers. Come into the party. Later, three responses. We're going to close like this. One, the first response is, if you do identify with that lost younger brother, self-indulgent, who is in broken relationship with the Father because you have disregard for his standard, come. Come get clean. Confess your sin. Repent. And come home. Secondly, stand with me. If you identify with a lost older son who is in a broken relationship with his father because you're self-righteous and full of anger and an offense at God and others, somebody else, come humble yourself today. Swallow your pride and confess your sin of offense. You're offended at God and others. Today's your opportunity to come home and come make it right. See, he was living at home, but he wasn't home. He was inside the house, but he wasn't right with the Father. That's a sign of an elder brother spirit. You grew up in church, around Jesus all of your life. I don't know who you are, but God sent me about 6,000 miles to invite you to come home. You're the primary audience today. I don't know who you are. There's an invitation for you to come home. I'm going to ask you boldly in a moment to come forward. Finally, maybe you feel like I'm good with the Father. I don't really feel like I've made things right with him. But you don't have the same feeling of that Ryota's friends had of loving the things that he loves. God loves the lost, and he wants them found. He wants them home. And if you need a fresh burden for the lost to be found, I'm going to invite you in a moment to come and receive prayer.